before, but for those new listeners, which some people think we don't have, but we do, welcome to the show, Glenn, and go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'm very excited about being on today or tonight. So yeah, I was this wasn't what I was expecting a week ago when I was watching Marco debate Vince. I was expecting actually Vince and Scott to become allies, but it's not the way it's panned out. It's actually panned out that, unbelievably, there's something of a feud going on between Scott Johnson and Vince, the business king. Now, this really does blow me away. Actually, though, can we first start to have a look at how Scott invited Vince / the business king onto Building Fortunes Radio? Do you want to talk me through that?
Now, well, first of all, is he the business king, or is he the self-proclaimed home business king? Which one is he? I forget.
Yeah. He's the self-proclaimed home business king. If you have a look at his page, it says, "The home business king, building empires from the comfort of your own home." It's a big claim.
Yeah, nothing like an income claim.
It's a big claim. Helping somebody build an empire from home.
Yep, no doubt. Yeah, so just to give people a little bit of background, I noticed Vince messaging Marco on his live shows. I think it was back on October 14th, because I wrote Glenn I wrote Vince my first email on October 15th, and Marco didn't notice that Vince was reaching out to him yet. He had made a comment. I think he even sent some instant messages on social media, and Marco is so famous, he just doesn't see everything because he gets such a barrage of, people that are just adulating him that he just, is overwhelmed by the numbers. So, it's understandable that he didn't see these messages. But over time, Vince kept putting in messages on subsequent shows as well. But let me go ahead and do this first email that I sent to Vince before Marco even noticed that Vince was reaching out to him. So here's my email. It says, "Vince, why would you want to debate Marco on MLMs when you can debate someone who knows what they're talking about? Come on my podcast and let's debate. If you're interested, respond to this email. If you're scared, don't." And so that was my first email to Vince, because I really wanted to, kind of help him understand how stupid Marco is. And I just wanted to, give him some heads up. And it turns out, Glenn, that when he did go on Marco's show, and we never did talk before his show, by the way, me and Vince, from an MLM perspective, we're pretty much in alignment as far as the importance of retail sales. And that's what Vince claims, and I'm not doubting his claim. I'm just saying that's his claim, that he did a lot of retail sales. In fact, he did mostly retail sales when it comes to how much profit he made. And so I don't think the average distributor needs to go to that extent. But he said he was when he did go on Marco's show, he said he had been selling Avon since he was, I think he said 13 years old. And so, he goes way back, and obviously Avon is one of those companies, especially in the past before the MLM model came into being. That's all you could do because it was direct selling. There was no upline or downline. You made your money by how much you sold. And his, I think, parents and grandparents had been in MLM. So he had grown up in MLM. He was third generation, which, of course, got comments on Marco's channel that, "Oh, Vince, I feel so sorry for you to be, third generation MLM. You must be such a miserable person and all of this." No, he just was in a selling environment, and it came naturally to him. So, but anyway, I'll stop there, Glenn. That was my first email, talk to me first, and if you're too scared, don't email me back. That was just kind of a psychological challenge. I want to see if somebody's going to lean forward into that, or if they're going to back off and be actually scared to even respond to an email. How harmful can an email be to return? So that's kind of how it got started, Glenn. Did you want to talk about anything else with that particular email, or I could go to the next email?
Yeah. Go to the next one, please, Scott.
Okay. So the next one was on October 18th. So I gave him 3 days, no response. And I said, Vince, you must really be scared of me. I can answer this question that you posed to Marco. Okay, so this was a question, again, that Vince put on Marco's live stream, and I think that Marco hadn't seen any of his comments yet still. You know, Marco had just been passing over the comments, and he didn't notice Vince's question during his live stream. And so here's the question that Vince asked Marco on Marco's live stream. You know, Marco, I've seen all your video targeting, you should have said videos targeting, right? It's plural. Now, when you have just a Yahoo email, it makes you extremely intelligent. And so you pick up things like this. When you have your own email, like Vince does, vince@caliberfitness.com, you're kind of stupid, and you don't understand when to use a plural word in a sentence. So I just want to kind of point that out, right? That's kind of a red flag for me. When you have your own email, it just means you're probably not very bright. So it says, I've seen all your video targeting MLM companies, which is all fine and dandy, but at no point have you recommended where someone should work at to make money or any options for those who wish to make honest money. What would you recommend? I think it's 5 question marks. So, again, that was Vince's question for Marco, and I told him that I can answer that question. And then after I quoted his question that he asked Marco, I said, but you have to debate it on my podcast with me, LOL. So that was the second email. 3 days later, again, I got no response to the first one, and I just had to assume he was scared because, you know, how harmful can it be to send somebody an email? So that's the second one, Glenn. Did you have any comments on that? I can go on to the next one.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, for those of you who are watching this on my YouTube channel, MLM is Fraud, which is my channel, Vince Notzens, I'm now going to play Vince reading the emails, and we'll just compare sort of Vince's take on what's transpired compared to Scott Johnson's. All right, so now...
Hey everybody, Home Business King here at homebusinessking.com. The reason for this video is ahead, and you know, I got some of these crazy messages from this individual by the name of Scott. Let me put this on the screen for you guys here. He goes and he wrote me on the 15th, why would you want to debate Marco about MLMs when you can debate someone who knows what they're talking about? Come to my podcast and let's debate. If you're interested, respond to this email. If you're scared, don't. Best regards, Scott Johnson. Then we get another message. I didn't respond to it because, number one, if you guys notice, I have an email address that says vince@caliberfitness.com. That's my business email for my fitness business. My main email for other things is admin@goodrumgroup.com or admin@homebusinessking.com. Scott uses a free Yahoo account, so from the starters there, you know, I don't really pay much attention to anyone that uses a free email account. You know, it doesn't cost that much money to register an actual domain for your podcast or whatever you're hitting at. But in any event, I'll just ignore that. A lot of people do have free email accounts. I get this message on the 18th, and let me enlarge this here. Vince, you must really be scared of me. I can answer this question that you posted to Marco. You know, Marco, I've seen your video targeting MLM companies, which is all fine and dandy, but at no point have you recommended where someone should work at to make money or any options for those who wish to make honest money. What do you recommend? If you had paid attention to the debates, Scott, you would have heard exactly what I would have said, plain and simple. I told people they can get themselves a regular job, do affiliate marketing, do direct sales, do something that they have the ability to do. If someone paints pictures, they should paint pictures. If someone likes rapping, they can keep rapping, get those commas up. But at this point in time, if you want bread, go get a job at a bakery. But obviously, you didn't pay attention to the debate. You just think that I'm just scared of you. I don't know what you wrote Thursday. There's nothing here. Maybe you were writing to, I don't know who this Peter is, special information at hotmail.com, another one of these free accounts. I don't really respect anyone that's in business that uses a free account there, a free email account. Just register a domain. You can get a domain as cheap as like $4.99. It makes you look a lot better. Vince, be sure to ask Marco about his cocaine dealing career. Listen, folks. I knew everything I needed to know about Marco long before we debated, I always do research as far as to, who I'm debating, and sometimes I will play dumb with someone in order to get the advantage. That's a debate, folks. That's a debate. Now, here's the thing there, Scott. I'm going to ignore the messages that you've made. You're not going to get the fun, goofy Melvin that was in the debate. You're going to get the serious one, plain and simple. I've checked out your channel itself. I don't know nothing about podcasts. I've not done any podcast in...
You've listened to Vince's explanation. Right, so let's... Scott, I feel like you're not doing yourself justice when you invite people onto your podcast like that. Vince is obviously your guy. He identifies as being the home business king. So there's a fair amount of ego there. So he would not appreciate you saying that he's scared of you. I just feel like it's a bit of a tragedy because my view is this. You've got the best knowledge of the Amway tool scam of anybody that I've ever spoken to. But you get people offside when you invite them like that. I think Bam was another one. I think if you had have been a bit nicer when you invited Bam on, he would have come on. And then, Julie Anderson's another one. If you hadn't have called her a nut job before you spoke to her, then after you had a nice conversation, I feel like she would have come back multiple times. So, can you see what I'm saying?
Well, I do have to straighten out one thing, not on your comment, Glenn, but I've heard some other MLM Huns saying that I called her a nut job after she was on the show. I actually called her a nut job before she was on the show also. I just want people to understand that happened. But again, the only thing I told Vince originally was, email me back unless you're scared. So
that's not the best way to go.
How can you be scared of sending an email?
Well, I think if you had just sent a nice, polite, respectful email, and you've got to also acknowledge you're emailing somebody with a big ego. This is a person who sees himself as being the king, the guru, the ultimate king of home businesses. So, you need to sort of write to him in that way. I just think if you had have been, the approach was a little bit off. I would have, if you had just sent a slightly more respectful email saying, I'd like to come on and discuss with you. You've got a big following on YouTube and through your podcast. Let's have a discussion about this. I think you would have been more likely to get him on the channel. And then that would have meant that his fans would have learnt the truth about the Amway tool scam, because let's be real, if you're 18 years of age and you're only listening to Vince, who's the home business king, and you're thinking about joining an MLM, Vince isn't going to tell them about the Amway tool scam. So the 18-year-old kid is less likely to join Amway and fall victim to the brainwashing materials of the Amway tool scam if you just change your approach a little bit.
Well, I'm not going to do that, Glenn. That's not my personality. This is a strategy I have. If you're a strong person, you'll lean forward into that challenge. If you're a weak person, you'll lean backwards. I'm looking for strong people. And so if you fail that test, then you fail that test. Now, that doesn't mean it's the first and last test, but you did fail that test because you didn't lean into it. This is a tough thing to do, to keep pushing and pushing against MLM scams. And if you're not tough, I don't want to work with you, because you have to be tough just to be able to stay in the game, because you're going to get insulted left and right. I mean, I do all the time, on Narco's show, on all these other anti-MLM Huns as well, and you have to be strong. And so if you're weak, I want to weed you out at the beginning. I don't want to dance with you for a while, because I used to do that, right? I did that on Savvy Writes Books on her show. I used to try to do a dance with people. And what I found out was every single one of them, and I did it several times, every single one of them, they just wanted to talk for a while and then go off and do something else. And I'm looking for people that want to do something, like Peter. Peter and I have done this show every single week, save for just a handful, for over 8 years. That's who I'm looking for. I'm not looking for some fly-by-night person that wants to make a couple comments and go off and do something. So that's why I do that, Glenn. I do that so that I'm testing them to see if they're tough. And all I'm doing is saying, don't write me an email back if you're scared. I mean, come on. How threatening is that?
Well, it hasn't worked, because he's now got his back up and
it has worked.
Someone to this show, which I really think is a tragedy, because if he would,
it did work, Glenn. It did work. It not only weeded him out, but he went on Marco's show, and now I've got all kinds of nice, interesting things to talk about Glenn. I mean, about Vince. And so it worked splendidly. I'm so happy with the way it worked out.
Okay, all right. So we disagree on your approach. That's fine. Let's move on to what you think about some of the things that Vince said. Can I start with my? You want me
to do a couple more emails, because I did do a couple more emails to him.
Yep. You're obviously not going to take my advice. My advice would be to have a less confrontational approach in the emails. But clearly, you're not going to listen to my advice, which is fine. But I challenge Vince too. I'd love to see Vince come on to Building Fortunes Radio. I'd love to see Bam go on to Building Fortunes Radio. I think it'd be a really, really good episode. I thought the episode that you did, you and Julie Anderson and Peter did on Building Fortunes Radio, was really, really interesting. But yeah, I think when you're calling people a nut job, they're not likely. A lot of people aren't going to want to come and talk to you on the internet if you're calling them a nut job.
And that's fine with me. I got plenty of guests. No problem at all.
But not many guests are as big as Julie Anderson. Julie Anderson's got a fairly large audience.
It's not very big. It's not very big at all.
There's a lot of YouTubers with much smaller audiences than Julie Anderson's who would love to have that sort of audience and that sort of reach. But you said Narco's small time with as you would say, only 88.3K. So you're a hard man to please, Scott.
No, I'm easy to please. If you're tough, then I'll work with you. If you're a wimp, I don't even want to work with you. So it helps me manage my time better by saying,
well, what about though if talking to someone who you think is a wimp or is a wimp?
I don't know until they either. I don't know if they're a wimp until they either answer or don't answer. I don't know the answer to that question until they respond.
All right, let's say if you talk to them and then they turned out to be a wimp, it would still be a good result, because you could then explain to their audience the damaging problems of the Amway tool scam, the Amway brainwashing tools. that are a major part of why so many people get brainwashed by this evil industry. But yeah, all right. So let's just talk about.
I mean, to me, even the largest anti-MLMer out there is not that big in the big picture. In the big scheme of things, even the largest anti-MLMer is small potatoes compared to the population. So, to me, there's no big anti-MLMer. They're all small in the big picture. So, and by the way, Glenn, you're not the first one to make this recommendation to me. So, it's nothing. I mean, that's what Savvy spent her whole, what was it, hour and a half, 2 hours trying to convince me. I appreciate the input, but I'm not going to take it. Okay.
You make a good point. All right. I'll raise the white flag on that one. I'll give up on that. Can we go to what we? You want to
go to the next email?
I want to finish the emails off, and then I want to speak about Vince's for a man who is meant to be an authority, the king of home-based businesses, his incredible lack of research on you and on me and confusing us and getting us mixed up. I find it absolutely extraordinary.
Well, we do sound pretty similar, don't we, Glenn?
I wouldn't have thought so. And anyone who knows anything about you knows that you wouldn't have a channel called MLM is fraud, because you're of the belief that it's not fraud when it's done right. So if you know anything about Scott Johnson, you know that MLM is fraud is not Scott Johnson's channel.
Right. So I'll finish up the emails real quickly, and we'll get into that topic. That's a great topic. So my previous email was October 18th that I just read out. The next one I wrote is October 26th. Right. So we're talking over a week later. I said, Vince, it's a waste of time to IM Marco when you can talk with me instead. It's hard to believe that you're this scared of me. That was my next email. And then my last email to him, which was the day of, and it was a few hours before Marco's next live stream, because by then, Marco had realized that Vince was trying to get on his show, and Marco likes to take on all challengers. So he, by this time, I know that they had already set up to have Vince on the show on that evening. On this is now November 4th. Okay, so this is over a week after the previous email. Okay, so here's my email to Vince on the day of he was going to be on Narco's show. I said, Vince, be sure to ask Marco, about his cocaine dealing, quote unquote, career. And then I put the link to the Rumble story. And if you go to rumble.com and you put in text, TEX, all one word, this video will pop up that Marco made. And he's taken down, of course, because he's trying to remake himself. And he talks for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is, with him and his buddy Philip, who were cocaine dealers. And I mean, it's obvious that Marco admitted to being a cocaine dealer. And so I just wanted Vince to know the character of this person that he was going to go on his show. And that was the last email I had with Vince. And I never had any response via email from Vince. So that's the last of it. If you wanted to make any comments on those last couple of emails, Glenn, or if you wanted to get off into the expert that Glenn envisions himself to be.
I think I've made my my feelings clear on that one. I don't think it's the right way to approach it. You disagree, so let's leave it at that. Let's move on to can I start with what I made of Vince's appearance on Always Marco?
What's that?